as a Unitarian throughout the various stages of my life. I kind of came to solidify my beliefs when I had a family, because I wanted my children to be raised as UUs. I was also lucky enough to be a registered nurse at a time when it was expected and encouraged for us to sit at a patient's bedside and hold their hands and help them through whatever they were going through. I saw patients of all different kinds of face. I saw patients with no face. And I saw over and over again how alike our human responses are, even the response of the experience of death. And that helped, again, to solidify my beliefs as a UU. I believe we're all looking at the same puzzle, the human condition. And we all have different ways of explaining what we see. We may not agree with each other's conclusions, but it's the bits in between where I think we find unity. I particularly like the golden rule. I've found the golden rule in nearly every major religion, though again, how it's interpreted by members of that religion can be very different. I particularly like the idea that the core of our humanity and the core of being a Unitarian is kind of, for me, summed up in one word, and that's empathy. What brings me joy brings you joy. What brings me pain brings you pain. I believe that, we can celebrate the wonder and joy of what people believe without necessarily, again, agreeing with their conclusions. I love going to Mass. I go to Mass for a lot of reasons, for comfort. I love going to the synagogue. My best friends are Jewish. A good bit of my family in Canada is Jewish. And I just like the structure and the pageantry and the words. I loved hearing Linda sing the blessings. I speak no Hebrew or anything, but those are familiar from all the Hanukkahs we spent at our friend's house, and they brought me a great deal of joy. I think it's really hard to build bridges rather than burn them. Sometimes it's so hard. And we can all look to last November for that. But I think we need to try to do that. I think it's really important. I think it's important, the interconnectedness of our beliefs. And that's expressed in our UU covenant to me. Shared aspects of faith and unity are important, and I believe that celebrating the diverse aspects of our faith is just as important. I do believe it is possible to live together in peace and mutual respect, though sometimes it's so hard. I don't have any belief in the supernatural realm, but that doesn't mean I don't have anything that's not sacred to me, anything worthy of worship, devotion, and service. I do have a concept of paradise, but it's on earth rather than in the heavens. I do not look to the stars for my sense of paradise or heaven or whatever word you would like to assign to it. I do look to nature, and I hope as a species we will learn to live together with the family on earth that is nature. I'm a huge movie buff, and one of my favorite movies is Interstellar, and a quote from that. We used to look up to the sky and wonder about our place in the stars. Now we just look down and worry about our place in the dirt. Maybe we don't worry about it, but we should be concerned about it, I think, and we need to know when we look down at the dirt that it's the same dirt everyone else is worrying about as well. In conclusion, I believe we're all gods and goddesses trying our best to connect. I think we're all stardust and unicorns, as my granddaughter would say, and part of the universe, which began when another one ended. I may not be sure where I end up, but I do want to enjoy the journey, and for me, being a UU and trying to live with our creed and covenant is a big part of that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Geary, and at this point, I believe that there has to be a unity or an intelligence behind the universe, and if people want to call that God, I'm okay with that. But I can't imagine that that entity has any concern about whether we call ourselves Baptists or Hindus or Unitarians. So what's important to me is how we treat each other. So that's at this point where I am. I started out, my family of origin went to what I believe was a fundamentalist Southern Baptist church. My father was a NASA engineer and collected different biblical translations, so I don't think he would have considered himself a fundamentalist, but that was the church. I enjoyed the services, I enjoyed the singing, I enjoyed the stories, but very early on I started to see conflicts in the way people behaved and treated each other. When I was 7, my grandmother died of what I now know was uterine cancer, and I just knew she was very sick and in pain. And when she died, my mother told me that she had gone to be with Jesus and that she was all better now. But they took me to the funeral, which was probably not the best idea. At 7, what I saw was people weeping and wailing and screaming because an old woman, I don't know, she may have only been in her 70s, but had passed. And this to me seemed, if this whole thing that I was told about going home to be with Jesus thing, if this whole thing was true, that behavior seemed a little odd. So there were things, specific things that drove me out of the Baptist church. Primarily racial issues. This was in the late 1960s. My parents still went to a Baptist church in Huntsville, Alabama. There was a missionary who came to speak, who was a very well-known missionary, and at the invitation of the pastor, there was a group of black ministers, about half a dozen, that came in to hear him speak, sat in the back, and left quietly. That incident split the church. Those who supported the pastor's decision, he and those left and formed another congregation, and my parents stayed with the wrong group. So that, and then I was aware, I tried to stay a Baptist. I even went to a Baptist college. And fortunately, I did have Old Testament and New Testament history. Fortunately, the teacher was a scholar, and I learned about the development of the biblical text over time, about how it was compiled under the Emperor Constantine, very much like what we have today, which was a good thing. It helped me reconcile what I had discovered in reading the Bible, because I was an avid reader. They had those little books, with the passages that you read and then commentary, and I'd been reading those since I was about 10. So I was very aware that Yahweh was not a nice guy. And so by the time I was, say, 12 or so, I was looking at questions like, what about the Indians before the missionaries came to the New World? I guess everybody asks themselves that at about that time. And then I had also put together, I learned about, in school I learned about Egypt and the worship of the sun god, Aten, the god of love and light. Put that together with the whole story of Jesus' family escaping Herod and going to Egypt and then not showing up again until he was about 12. And I had decided that he had come back to minister to his people and tell them about the God of love and light rather than the God of vengeance. Well, my Sunday school teacher and my mother were not real excited about that revelation. They were not excited about many of my questions and comments. So it was a bit of a struggle, but that was the thing that turned the corner for me was when I realized that at this Baptist college, they didn't serve dinner on Sunday night. You had to go to the church right off of campus to get dinner. And dinner was served by black women in white uniforms, and there were no dark faces in the congregation. And so that set me on a journey of investigating other Christian denominations, but I couldn't find anything different. And I had to get up and leave the dorm because there was a squad that went through the dorm to make sure you were up and out on Sunday morning. And this was in Nashville with a cluster of colleges together, and there was David Lipscomb, which I think at the time might have been Church of Christ, and there was a chapel where there was no service on Sunday morning. It was built around a wood carving of a replica of the painting The Last Supper. And it was quiet and it was beautiful, and so I would get up and go to that chapel and sit and wait for church time to be over in the beauty, sort of meditating, I guess, although I didn't know that term right at that time. And then one of my classmates asked me, he said, where are you going? I see you leave and there's no church in that direction. And I told him what I was doing, and he said, did you know there are people who do that in groups? I said, really? He said, Quakers. I said, there are still Quakers? So I went with him to the Quaker meeting that was meeting in the David Lipscomb Library. And that was the beginning of about 40 years of identifying as a Quaker. And there was so much to draw me into that, the love of questions, the whole idea of loving the questions. But even so, I found myself, what I would say, sort of hanging on to the left edge of Quakerism by my fingernails. Because even though the early Quakers were Universalists, William Penn greeted the Indians in the name of the God we both worship. In the middle 1650s, a group of 11 Quaker women went to meet with the head of the Ottoman Empire to confer with him, and came back saying, those people have got a pretty good idea. So the early Quakers were very Universalist, but since about the 1820s, Quakerism has sort of crept more and more toward Christianity. And so that, even though I'm still active in the regional organization and run the bookstore for the annual gathering, I've come to hang out with the Unitarians. And I'm not a Unitarian in the sense that the Wikipedia would define it. I'm really a Universalist in the sense of the entire universe. But I really enjoy the community here, and I really appreciate your making me welcome. Thank you.
So I'm Stuart Kaplan, and going to share some things, and want to share appreciation for Linda, who does so much to keep our programs together. And she said, when she invited me to do this, she gave some advice, like, write down what you're going to say. It could help. And I don't know if I'm going to even read this stuff, but one of my thoughts was of Lao Tzu, who, the wise man in China who was asked to write down his wisdom, and the very first thing he wrote was, the Tao that could be written is not the true Tao. So, but I'll tell some stories here about why I'm here and what I believe. So, and I did write things down, Linda. As a young child, I attended Hebrew school. It was after regular school, 2 days a week, and then on Saturdays. And for the first few years, I enjoyed it. You know, I learned how to actually read Hebrew. And there was only a couple of other Jews living in Levittown at that time, and we would write notes in Hebrew to each other in class, because we knew if we got caught, nobody else could read it. And we would say some nasty things about the teachers. But anyway, after a few years of Hebrew school, I resented being there. All my friends would be out after school playing, and I would have to be studying this stuff, and I started acting out. And one day the rabbi said to me, after I was being pretty nasty, he said, "Go into the temple and talk to God." So I went alone into the temple, and I thought about talking to God, and I thought about the story that the rabbi had just told us about Abraham, the father of the Jews, who at one point just went into his father's shop where he had all these idols, and he destroyed them except for the biggest one. And when the father came into the shop and saw all the destroyed idols, he said, what happened here? He said, "Well, this one did it." And he said, "No, they can't do that." So I thought, okay, I just learned this story. Maybe I'll take the Torah out of the Bina and destroy it. And when the rabbi comes, I'll just say, "Your invisible God did this." But I did have some conscience, and I didn't do that. But, but that started me on my, questioning things. I questioned what I was raised to believe. And it appears that agnostics are the most inquisitive and questioning the doctrines they have been presented with. That's why a lot of us here are Unitarians. We question things. So I was a teenager in the 60s, and one of the things, my questioning mind, I watched bands like the Moody Blues and the Beatles change from one type of music to another after they had done LSD. And I was inquisitive, and one night I did take some LSD, and I went into a state where nothing existed except for pure white light. I can remember I was with friends and I was able to talk, and I remember just saying, "Just tell me if the house is on fire or if I'm going into the bathroom and myself, because all I see is light." And it was a wonderful experience. And I was curious as to what happened, and reading some books, they said, "Oh, you stimulated your kundalini and your seventh chakra lit up." And I wanted to explore this deeper, and I got into yoga and meditation because I wanted to attain this state without the benefit of psychedelics, which I never have done. But yoga has helped me throughout the years maintain a certain level of awareness and health, and I really appreciate that. So I left the world of psychedelics decades ago. However, a few years ago, I wanted to do something very special on my 70th birthday, and I had met a young woman who had traveled the world exploring plant medicine, and she invited me to experience ayahuasca. So I spent a weekend at her house. She was a wonderful musician. Her mother was a composer, and there were 3 other people there who were wonderful musicians. I was the only non-musician, and the whole weekend was just amazing. The music and the colors that went through my mind were just beautiful. But the main thing, I went into this experience turning 70, and I thought, what does it mean to be an elder? How do I go into the world as an elder? And 2 words came into my awareness: trust and surrender. And that's a big part of what I've been experiencing so often, these synchronistic experiences and things that, like there's a bumper sticker that says something like, "If you're not amazed, you're not paying attention." And there's something in my mind much bigger that's in control, and that when I can trust and to surrender to this, it makes my life a lot easier. And if I had to sum up my belief system, I could just go by the words that are written on this wall, that love is my doctrine, and the quest for truth as sacrament, and service is my prayer. So, thank you.
Well, thank you to all three of our speakers this morning. It is